Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar. We have a practice in coping skills addressing stress and anxiety. My name is Amanda Martinez, and I am the training program manager for Mental Health America of Hawaii. And today I'm joined by Dr. Misty Sagas. Dr. D, did you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Aloha, everyone. I'm Dr. Misty Sagas, the Program Director for Mental Health America of Hawaii.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. G. Right. So for today's webinar, if you haven't joined us for any previous ones, it's the same exact process. It is in webinar format, so all of your cameras and microphones are automatically turned off. So don't worry too much about accidentally turning anything on. It should not happen. It is being recorded, and you will have access to these slides after the conclusion of today. So look out for that follow-up email. Those will be included. We will have some time at the end for some questions, so feel free to use the Q&A feature that you have on your Zoom toolbar. For any questions that may come up, we're happy to answer them. You'll have our contact information as well at the end in case any of those questions come up afterwards. But for today, what we will be going over and really talking about is an exploration of coping skills. Like, why are they important? When should we be utilizing them? And how can we use those skills to really build our emotional strength, right? Increase our resiliency, not only for ourselves, right? But for others, right? For our keiki and adolescents too. Right, so I did want to point out this quote by Maya Angelou. Right? So as you grow older, you will discover that you have two hands. One hand for helping yourself and the other for helping others. And I think this is a really great quote that highlights the importance of also taking care of yourself, right? I mean, you cannot pour into others when you yourself are empty. So we have to take that time, right, to invest in our self-care, to invest in our mental health, so we are able to show up for other people as well. And I use that word invest because Dr. G has this awesome analogy when she talks about self-care, is that we should be investing in our self-care much like we invest in our finances and our banks, right? That even when we may not need to use it in the moment, we feel like we don't need it at that time, that we're still investing and putting a little bit away when we have the opportunity to. Right? So let's jump right into talking about self-care. Right? And why we need to practice it, right? Why we need to work that into our schedules. So when it comes to self-care, we have some tips, right? So we want to validate our emotions, right? We're human beings, we have complex emotions. Our emotions are often mixed and they can be circular as well. We can feel lost or confused or overwhelmed at different times. And that's a very normal response to everything that's happening in our world today. I mean, so much is constantly changing, not just with the pandemic, but with the political climate of our country today, the events at the Capitol last week, with the social unrest that we see across the nation in every single community. We just have to remember and go back to validating our emotions, right? And it's okay to feel stressed out or anxious or upset at one moment, feel okay later on, and then go back to feeling upset. That's normal, right? That's a normal process. And when it comes down to it, your experiences are your experiences and they are absolutely valid, right? So again, totally normal to be feeling mixed emotions and even for our moods to kind of fluctuate throughout our day, throughout our week, throughout our lifetime. We can't necessarily control the emotions that we may be feeling, but what we do have some control over is our behaviors, right? As a result of managing those emotions. So what we can try to do is do our best to choose positive ways, right? To deal with those emotions. Okay, next we have stay connected. Again, as human beings, we're very social animals. We crave that feeling of being connected to other people. So yes, we should be physically distancing ourselves, right, from other people to keep our friends, our family members, and the larger community at large safe. But it doesn't mean that we should be isolating ourselves, right, and distancing ourselves in social manners. We absolutely should be reaching out to, checking in with, and connecting with our loved ones. And luckily enough, we live in a world today where technology still allows us to be able to do that. And I've seen people get really creative with how they get together with their friends and their loved ones, right? I've seen Zoom dance parties, study sessions, virtual movie nights. I've seen or heard of people even cooking meals together through FaceTime. So we can still get a little creative about it and still be safe, but we definitely should be bolstering those connections that we have with other people, even though we may be physically distancing ourselves. Next, we have don't overcheck, right? So this definitely comes to when we are checking the news, right? Of course, we want to stay informed and up to date about what's going on, but it may not always be the most helpful thing to constantly check the news or to check it even multiple times a day, especially with so many different kinds of information and sometimes even conflicting information that's constantly being made available to us. I mean, it's right at the tip of our fingers that we can access 24/7. So I would consider setting a time or two during the day to really get that information instead of continuously or multiple times a day checking it out. If I can bring my own little analogy to the table, if you can think of checking the news like monitoring your coffee intake. If you're a coffee drinker like I am, I know that when I have multiple cups of coffee at different points in my day, that's going to affect my mood and probably affect my ability to go to sleep at night. So if you're constantly checking the news or looking for that information, that also might have an impact on your mood and your ability to fall asleep. So just monitor your intake, right, when we're checking the news and staying informed. Next, we have kind of reaching out, right? So focus on the helpers, check in on the essential workers that you may know in your life or any vulnerable in your social circles. I think one of the more positive things to come out of everything that's been happening over the majority of last year and moving into this new year is that there's been an increased sense of community and really highlighting the importance of coming together and helping those in need if we can, right? If we have that ability to. And by doing so, by focusing on bolstering our sense of community, what we're doing is we're also fostering or creating a sense of hope for the future, right? Yes, there's a lot of uncertainty that's still ahead of us, but we're all kind of in this together, right? We're all moving forward together. And it could be really simple, that checking in, right? It doesn't have to be a huge grand gesture. It could be as simple as a phone call or a text saying, hey, you know, I was thinking about you today. How are you doing? Or if you have an essential worker or even a frontline worker in your life, you know, thank you so much for all that you're doing. Do you need anything, right? Can I do anything for you? Also follow a schedule, right? And schedule in self-care. So we love routine and consistency, right? So keeping a routine like going to bed or waking up around the same time, even while we are working remotely or learning remotely, is going to help provide us with some structure in our lives where things do seem to be uncertain. Right? So you can start kind of creating that routine or following that schedule by just going back to the basics, right? Work in and do your best to stick to a bedtime and waking up at a certain time every day, eating regular meals, working in that physical activity on a regular basis. This also means scheduling in our self-care as well. We also want to share information with other people as well. Sharing online resources, even if you yourself won't be using them, could definitely be beneficial to someone else, right? We always want to make sure, of course, that we are sharing information and resources from reputable sites, right? Reputable information, we're doing our homework, our fact checking, but it could definitely be beneficial, right? So spread that information if you know that it is accurate, and use social media responsibly, because I know social media is one of the many tools that we're using to stay connected with our friends and with our loved ones, but also kind of how we're passing around information a little bit as well. So just make sure that we're using social media responsibly. And, you know, whenever I have these kinds of talks with youth, we're talking about social media, I think it's a good reminder for adults as well, that even when we are online, even when we are behind a screen or a screen name, we should remain respectful and remain compassionate, even when there may be differences of opinions, right? So ask yourself before you post something, before you add a comment or interact with something, especially if it's something you don't necessarily agree with, is what I'm posting or what I'm sharing helpful? Is it going to help the situation at all? And if the answer is no, then maybe it's better for everyone all around to hold off on interacting through social media in that way. But it's always good just to be careful, right? Make sure we're using it responsibly. And it's also okay to take breaks from social media for a part of your day or for an extended period of time. Just check in with yourself every once in a while. You can ask yourself, after using social media, do I feel better? If that answer starts to be no a little more often than not, then maybe it might be a good idea to take a little step back from social media too. We want to invest in ourselves, like I was talking about earlier, and utilize various coping skills, which we will be getting more into in later slides. The key really is carving out that time to really invest in yourself and invest in your mental health as well. Find those 5 minutes at least every day, or hopefully a couple times a day, to practice self-care, whatever that looks like. So whatever that sounds like, tastes like, smells like, or feels like for you, just carve out that time and work it into your routines, even if that's only 5 minutes out of your day, a couple times a day. Right, so moving in, how do we kind of check in with ourselves? How do we gauge that level of stress and anxiety? We're going to be introducing to you and talking about this Likert scale. So this is going to be a really structured way for us to check in with ourselves and really gauge our anxiety and stress levels, and then think about the skills or tools that we can use to help manage our emotions when we are in a certain place. Right, so let me explain the layout of the scale a little bit for you. It ranges from 0 to 100. It's broken up into 3 different ranges. So this provides a nice visual for us to determine which skills or which tools are needed for specific ranges or situations. So I do want to explain a little bit of the differences between self-care, coping skills, and distress tolerance skills, right? So self-care would be kind of what we do on the day-to-day basis, right? The things that make us feel good, bring up our mood. Coping skills would be those tools that we use to manage increasing levels of anxiety and stress, right? So when self-care starts to not work as well or be as effective, we move on to coping skills. And then distress tolerance skills are really specific tools that we can do to help calm down our nervous system, right? So when we start experiencing symptoms like on a physiological level, the distress tolerance skills are going to help us calm our bodies down. Right, so let's take a look at the first range here, 0 to 40. This is the range we are in when we feel good or when we feel okay. You may not notice any discomfort or that you're experiencing any level of anxiety or stress. You have that very limited awareness. And this is really where self-care is especially effective, right? And this is also the range that we want to be depositing into our self-care bank accounts, right? We want to take that opportunity to continue practicing that self-care and building our emotional strength and increasing our resiliency. Even when we feel like we may not need it in this range, there may come a time where we do need to pull from that bank account to emotionally support ourselves or to show up for someone else and emotionally support them as well. Okay? And then remember, just go back to the basics, right? A healthy diet, a good sleep hygiene, getting in daily exercise, physical activity, and also remember to breathe, right? Take a breath. So let's actually practice breathing exercise together, because I know some of you are thinking, why do I have to remember to breathe when my body just does it naturally, right? I don't even have to think about it. I just breathe. And what we want to do when I say take a breath and remember to breathe is to be really conscious of how we are breathing and the area of the body that we're using to take that deep breath. So I'm just going to walk you through really quickly an example of a diaphragmatic breathing exercise, right? So this is a deep breathing exercise. I love breathing exercises because it's something that you can do anytime, no matter where you are, and it's not super obvious that you're utilizing one of your coping skills. So when we're taking a deep breath, I'm going to count you through it, but what I want you to do is take one hand and put it on your chest. I want you to take your second hand and put it at the top of your stomach, right above your belly button area. And I know I'm a little off camera, but hopefully you could see a little bit there at the top, right above your belly button. So when you take a deep breath in, I'm going to count you through it again, but I want the hand that's on your stomach to push out further than the hand that's on your chest, right? So I know your cameras are all off, so I'm having full faith in each of you that you're doing this along with me, but we're going to start by taking a deep breath in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for a second and back out. 4, 3, 2, 1. Super easy, right? Very simple. Let's do it one more time. Deep breath in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for a second and back out. 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, very simple, something you can do anytime, anywhere that you are, and it's going to help bring oxygen into your system and manage any kind of increasing levels of anxiety or stress. Okay? Now, the next range that we have is 40 to 60, right? So this is the range that we start to become aware that we are experiencing that anxiety or stress, right? That's when we start really feeling it in our body with those physiological symptoms like an increased heartbeat. Maybe we have some muscle tension, like your jaw is really tense. Maybe there's some stomach pains or nausea happening as well. And this is really where we want to use a combination of self-care and coping skills to help manage these anxiety levels. So for example, aromatherapy, if your interests lie in that area, autogenic training, meditation. So there's a lot of great free apps that are out there, free videos on YouTube that you can easily look up that'll help guide you really short and easy meditation exercises. We have progressive muscle relaxation and visualization. So I'm actually going to pass the virtual mic over to Dr. G, and she's going to walk us through one of these exercises.
Thanks, Amanda. I know there's a question in the Q&A, but we are going to be answering those towards the end of the session. So what we're going to be working on now is just doing an exercise on autogenic training. So we were talking a little bit about how the 40 to 60 range is actually a combination of a time when you can do self-care that can be effective, but also would want to try coping skills, because the closer you get to 60, the less effective you're going to find those self-care pieces, and the more effective you're going to find coping skills. So we did mention autogenic training, and this is something that a lot of people aren't as familiar with, but it is one of the things I really enjoy. And when we're talking about stress, what we're really talking about is your nervous system. How the higher your level of stress gets, the more likely it is that your nervous system is going to start to activate. And autogenic training is one of a couple of different ways that you can start to calm that nervous system again. So what we're going to do is just practice autogenic training. And here's how this is going to work. You're basically going to use a really simple script to do a little bit of almost self-hypnosis. When you're feeling stressed, when your nervous system activates, your body responds in certain ways. And one of the ways it responds is to change the flow of blood and to move it more into the torso. And why it does that is it makes it easier for you to run and fight if your limbs are lighter, but it also protects those vital organs. Why is that important? Because when that happens to your body, your brain actually reads it and says, look, I am stressed because my body's doing the things that it needs to do to protect itself when it feels stressed. So just by changing the body's response, you can also change the interpretation by the brain. So autogenic training says, let's use some self-hypnosis and let's see if the body will redistribute that blood and then also interpret that as calming down. So find a comfortable seating position, and once you're there, it's your choice whether you want to keep your eyes open or closed, but take in a really deep breath. Try using some of those diaphragmatic skills, that deep breathing skill we just learned, but take a really deep breath. As you're breathing in, hold it for a little bit, and then slowly exhale. I want you to concentrate on your breath. Taking another deep breath, holding it. Now slowly exhaling. As you continue to take these deep breaths, I want you to say to yourself, my breath is rhythmic and smooth. Repeating with me, my breath is rhythmic and smooth. Taking in that deep breath, holding it, and slowly exhaling. Moving your concentration to your right arm. Now say to yourself, my right arm feels heavy and warm. Again, my right arm feels heavy and warm. One more time. My right arm feels heavy and warm. Taking in another deep breath, holding it, and slowly exhaling. We're going to move our focus to your left arm, repeating after me. My left arm feels heavy and warm. My left arm feels heavy and warm. One more time. My left arm is heavy and warm. Taking in another deep breath, holding it. And as you exhale this time, imagine as you slowly exhale that tension being released from your body. And when you're ready to come back into the room, just slowly open your eyes and give a little stretch. Perfect. Now here's why autogenic training works. And I'm going to be really transparent and say it doesn't work for everyone. Some people like autogenic training, some people like progressive muscle relaxation, and we're going to practice that one in just a minute. But for those of you who found autogenic training to be relaxing, the reason that it works is to make your left arm heavy and warm, you have to redistribute that blood flow. And for some people, that self-hypnosis really does work, and they start to feel that their fingers are tingling or they're numb or they get warm. And that's just because that blood flow is changing for them. Other people don't find it as effective, but they like it because they enjoy the deep breathing and then the imaginative piece. But other people find progressive muscle relaxation to actually be more effective for them. And so we're going to move on to talk about what that is, and we're going to practice that in just a second. So progressive muscle relaxation is basically the opposite side of the coin for autogenic. Autogenic is using your mind to change the body, and progressive muscle relaxation is changing the body to change the mind. So how this works is your muscle tension actually is a highly adaptable thing. What I mean by that when I say that is that your brain takes only a certain amount of information in. And if it's not important, it kind of pushes that away. And if it's new and novel, it will kind of pay attention to it for a second. But then if it's not something, again, that's really important for it to keep a hold of, it will let it go. So to prove that point, I'm going to ask you just a couple of questions. So the first one is, how heavy is your shirt or dress that you're wearing? So right about now, you're becoming a little bit aware of how much it weighs, but it wasn't important before. So your mind adapted to the weight and then moved it into the area of not important. But if your shirt weighed 20 pounds, you would still be mindful of it because it would be uncomfortable and it would be something new and novel. So the next question is, what does the space between your eyes feel like? And even though I can't see all of you, some of you are like, trying to figure out what it does feel like, because that's not something we normally pay attention to. Why? Because there wasn't anything new or novel. There wasn't anything unsafe happening there. But if you had something sticking out here that was causing you pain, your brain would still be holding on to that information. And the last question is, how tight is your sock or shoe? Some of you always get a couple of people that says, I'm not wearing any shoes. That's the benefit of Zoom Life now. But for those of you who are wearing a soccer shoe, you're becoming a little bit more aware of what that feels like. And the reality is, if it were very tight and cutting off or constricting your circulation, it would still be something that your brain was holding on to. So why is that important, that your brain gets rid of information that it doesn't need? It's important because when we get stressed, one of the first things that your body does, especially when your nervous system is activated, is it tightens its muscles. It's preparing to run or fight. Now, the first time it does that, your brain goes, oh, that's different. We should really, keep that in focus. But the longer that it goes and nothing else is happening, your brain goes, oh, maybe that's not important. And so it adjusts to that new level. Now, when you think about that over 6 months or 6 years, if you're under pervasive amounts of stress, every time your muscle tension goes up, your brain interprets that, decides whether or not something unsafe is going to happen. And if it doesn't, it just says that's the new normal, and that's the new normal. And it keeps becoming more and more tense. And that becomes so familiar to you that you don't even notice that your day-to-day is a lot of muscle tightness. You could be experiencing tension headaches, pain in your muscles, in your neck, in your upper shoulders, and you could be really trying to kind of bring that level of tightness down, but not fully be aware of how much it's changed from what the baseline was before. So that's a really kind of like nerdy science explanation of why progressive muscle is really important. What progressive muscle is going to do for you is it's going to have you hyper tighten your muscle so that when you release it, your muscle will hyper release and your brain will interpret that and go, oh, wait, there's a lower level of function for our muscles. There's a lower level past what we've been considering baseline, and we can go back to that. And then your brain will say, look, we're calming down because our muscles are relaxing. So again, we're going to practice this because I want you to be able to feel what the difference is. So in this exercise, again, find a comfortable place to sit, and it's your preference whether or not you keep your eyes open or closed. Try to move your focus onto your body and start to take that deep breath again, breathing in deep from that diaphragm, holding it, and then slowly exhaling. Very good. Another deep breath, holding it, and then slowly bring that out. We're going to start by focusing on your forehead. What I want you to do is I want you to raise your eyebrows as high as you can, and we're going to hold that for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Slowly lower that back down. Taking a deep breath in, and again, imagining as you exhale that you're releasing some of that tension. Now we're going to move on to your mouth. So I want you to do is I want you to smile as widely as you can. And I want you to feel that tension in your cheeks. You're going to hold that smile for 5 seconds. You ready? It's hard to count and smile. So you smile, I'll count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let that smile go. And again, taking in a deep breath, holding it. And as you breathe out, imagine that tension leaving your body. We're going to move on to your shoulders because that's where we often keep our tension. So what we're going to do is you're going to pull those shoulders up as close as you can to the bottom of your ears in a shrug. And you're going to hold that for 5 seconds. You ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as you release, just imagine that tension flowing away. One last one. We're going to do our arms. So make a fist. Be careful if you have fingernails not to cut into the palm of your hands. Again, if you're having any discomfort, to stop doing the muscle group that you're doing and wait for the next one. So make that tight fist and holding it for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Letting that tension go, just shaking it out. Moving to your left hand, making that same tight fist, holding it for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then shaking that out. So take one more really good deep breath from that diaphragm. We're going to hold it for a second, and as we release that last breath, just imagine all that muscle tension escaping. Very good. This exercise is actually quite long, and what it's going to do is it's going to have you work through all your major muscle groups. It goes from the tip of your crown to the bottom of your feet. And if you're doing it and you experience any pain, we just highly recommend that you skip that muscle group and then touch base with your doctor to make sure that everything's okay. But progressive muscle relaxation is just going to hyperextend and hyper relax all those different muscle groups. So at the end of the exercise, you feel very relaxed and your baseline has lowered and your brain has interpreted that lowering as calming the nervous system. So moving on to our next slide. Perfect. We've talked about 0 to 40 and how that's a really great place to be if you're doing self-care. And that 40 to 60 is a place where you're going to be doing kind of a combination of that self-care and the coping skills. 60 to 100 is a different place to be. And the reason that we're talking about the 60 to 100 range, which honestly we didn't talk as much about it before, is because the level of anxiety that we're all experiencing is going up. So many of us are moving into that 60 to 100 range, that high level of stress, more than they ever did before. And here is it's unique. In the 60 to 100 range, your nervous system is absolutely activated, and you're going to want to use some really specific skills. It's very hard to plan, it's very hard to learn when your nervous system is so activated. It's difficult paying attention, concentrating, and in this place of 60 to 100, you're going to use some really specific coping skills. You can use autogenic training and progressive muscle relaxation and diaphragmatic breathing, but there's a couple of other ones that you can use as well that will help you calm that nervous system really quickly. And that's going to be the dive response, radical acceptance, being present focused, and then combining those. I always like to do combinations because I get more return by doing the same amount of time. And that's really important to know. And what I'm going to teach you are called distress tolerance skills. I could go into a really long spiel about how that comes out of dialectical behavioral therapy created by a woman named Marsha Linehan for people who grew up in chaotic homes and as adults really had a hard time regulating their emotions and also had a hard time calming their nervous systems. She actually looked across the world to figure out how do we calm our nervous systems and looked at religion, philosophy, psychology, spiritualism, a lot of different places. And then she pulled the ones that were most effective and had the most research to back it. So that's a little bit why we chose distress tolerance. You don't need to know all that backstory, but just to know it has a lot of research that supports it. Want to move forward one, Amanda? Perfect. The one that I want everyone to know, like I teach this to everyone that I work with, is a dive response. And the reason that it's important is it's very quick to do. It can calm your nervous system immediately. And it can also be it can be part of an exercise program or just part of you coming home from work and de-stressing. So what is the dive response? You have a gland inside of your nose that keeps you from involuntary breathing when you go swimming. So some of you right now are saying, Dr. G, I don't breathe because I hold my breath, right? But the reality is when we sleep, we don't even think about holding our breath. We don't think about breathing. It just it's involuntary, it just happens. And that could happen when we were swimming if we weren't paying really close attention. But our body does some really specific things when that gland gets activated. So why is that important for us to know if we're talking about anxiety? When we activate that gland, we do it by making sure that it gets wet and it becomes cold. And that mimics diving into water, hence the name dive response. When it gets activated, it says, we can't take any more breaths because we're swimming at this point. So we only have the oxygen in our body to use. And if I only have that amount and I just keep burning through it like I normally do, I'm going to run out really quickly. And I don't actually know when I'm going to take that next breath. So I want to slow the system down. I want to slow blood pressure down. I want to slow like blood circulation down, heart rate down, all those things. So I can keep as much of that oxygen as possible for as long as possible. So you can see how the dive response when activated actually calms the nervous system. It's automatic. This is a trap door into your nervous system to calm it without it even knowing it's happening. Some of you are saying, I can't go swimming every time I feel stressed. And I think that is actually quite honest. We can't all go do that. But your brain doesn't know the difference between a cold, wet rag put across this portion of the face or putting your face and submerging it into a cold bowl of water and holding your breath for 10 seconds. It doesn't really know the difference between those things. And swimming, it just knows that the same gland is being activated. So if you are in a place to want to use this because you're at 60, 70, 80, and you need to do it, but you don't have access to water, you can still use a cold, damp rag and hold your breath while you put it on your face for 10 seconds and still get the same return. The dive response is a wonderful thing to use for people who are feeling very overwhelmed the point where they're having a hard time talking about it. Let them use that and then move back into a conversation once they can tell you they are back into that 40 to 60 range. And then forward. Combination skills. Here's where we get a lot of kind of return for the same amount of time. So what do I mean by combining skills? If you think about things like swimming, swimming is going to have you kind of tighten muscles as you move through the water, but it also relaxes as that tension, as that like pushback from the water lets up every once in a while. It also requires you to pace how you breathe and to take those really deep diaphragmatic breaths. And it activates the dive response. So you get 3 returns for 1 exercise. You can see now that we can spend the same amount of time doing a type of self-care coping skill, but then stacking them on top of each other. If I was going to do, and this is me, I do this all the time. If I was going to use the dive response, but not want to do it swimming, I would take a cold, damp rag, put a little bit of lavender essential oil in that water before I wring it back out and put it over this part of my face, and then also do diaphragmatic breathing. So I have aromatherapy, activating the dive response, and then that diaphragmatic breathing. I get 3 for the same amount of time that I would have if I just did the 1. All these skills are going to be highly effective for you, but some of them not as effective as others, which is why we're talking about the different options that you have. We want you to be able to try some of these out, and if they don't work, that's okay. And if they do, that's great. You can just figure out how to fit that into your self-care regimen or how to make sure that those things are available for your use if you need to use them when you're feeling stress. Moving forward. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about using the self-care skills for yourself. I think one of the things that's important to understand is that we're all individualistic. We all have a different way of expressing how we feel. And it's important for you to know what your physiological tells are for stress and anxiety because they can look very different. For example, let's just take emotion of anger. People express being angry very differently. Some people have hot anger and it's explosive and they get loud and they're like bustling around and you can see that they're really angry. That's how they express that emotion. Whereas other people can have a cold anger and it's really subtle. It's the tension in the jaw. It's that like spark of glare in the eye and their voice lowers instead of gets louder. It looks very different. And I think that that's true as well for things like anxiety and stress, that some people on the outside might look very calm, but also could be experiencing issues with sleep or digestion. And other people could be fidgety, have a hard time paying attention and concentrating, but be okay in terms of sleep or be okay in terms of digestion. Everyone's just looks a little bit different. And you are the best person to understand and to identify what those tells are so that you can say, you know, I've been getting more headaches lately. My sleep hasn't been as good. And I know that those are really big signs for me feeling stressed. So that's the first thing I highly recommend is learning about what your anxiety and stress looks like in your body, figuring out what it looks like for you when you're moving out of the different Likert ranges. So how do you know when you're moving out of 40 to 60, I can still use my skills and manage, but it's getting hard. And then 60 to 100, where these skills aren't working anymore and I need to use those distress tolerance skills. How do you know when you've moved from one to the other? That's really important to identify for yourself. Making sure that you're using appropriate self-care and coping skills that we've talked about that are effective for you. Reach out to your support system to make sure that they're there for you. I always say it's important to kind of like grow those relationships like you grow your garden. You don't like put all the effort in just one day and expect a really big return. It's really about that slow and steady sharing, being vulnerable and connecting with people over that long period of time so that they're there for you when you need them and you're there for them when they need you. And then just learn more about yourself. This probably sounds narcissistic. I love learning about myself. I think that people who like ever took Psychology 101 probably feels the same. Like it's so interesting. And there are some things that you can learn about yourself that could be really effective in this kind of self-care model. I'm going to move forward, Amanda. One of the things that you can start to learn about is to ask yourself about the pieces of yourself. And what I mean by that is learning more about yourself and how you orient to other people and to your environment, because that teaches you how you manage stress. So how do you communicate? Are you one of those people who tend to like to talk about how you're feeling, or one that kind of tends to pull back? So maybe you're going to opt for journaling instead. What creates stress in your life? For some people, they're really good at handling those small hassles that build up across the different days. And for other people, they're not. They're like, I don't like when I have multiple small things that tend to go awry. I can handle the big one, but I can't handle the small one. That's important to know because it's going to tell you when you need to start to implement different types of self-care coping skills. What can you do that makes you feel better? This is so important because you need to learn it to be able to share it with other people. And you want them to know how you feel better before they need to use it. Because again, it's hard to communicate when you're in that 60 to 100 range. What are your personal strengths? You want to lean into those personal strengths when you are feeling stressed out, because that's where you feel mastery, comfort, and that's what's going to make you feel better a bit, is going into that place of personal strength. And just like all coins, it has the opposite side. So you also want to learn where your growth edges are. And we all have them. And I think that it's important for us because sometimes culturally we have an emphasis on perfection or being really good at something all the time. The reality is, if you're not pushing yourself and being uncomfortable and learning new things that you might not be great at, then you're not pushing out those growth edges. And it's okay to have them. It's okay to honor. You might not have gotten everything that you needed to as you were growing up or in early adulthood, but it is important to say, I can learn that now. I can practice that now and get better at it. And you can also learn how to cope with specific emotions. Some people are better at certain emotions. I have friends who are really comfortable with sadness or, grief because they've gone through it so many times. And I have other friends who aren't as comfortable with those things or are uncomfortable with emotions like anger. So we all have different ways we cope differently with those emotions, and just being aware of which ones you're comfortable with and not comfortable with, and where you might want to, again, do that work. And identifying who's in your support system. The support system can look very different. I think there are people I call and talk to about what's happening, people I talk to because they make me laugh. And that is so important right now with everything that's happening. And there are other people I call that I really respect their opinion, and I just need to bounce it off and get really good advice. Not everyone I call do I want advice from. And that's okay to say. It's okay to say, I'm just calling to vent. I don't need any advice. I just need to get this off my chest. And most people, I think, that are in a really healthy place can accept that. And it could even be freeing to know that you don't have to listen intently and come up with a really great plan at the end, that all you have to do is be there and be present. And then the next one, Amanda. Okay, so using skills for others. We're learning a lot of different coping skills today, and it's really important to know that you can use them and you can share them with other people. And the moments that you want to be able to share those and make sure people are utilizing them is when you're starting to see some of those warning signs. If you know that someone has a history of mental health challenges, you really want to make sure that we're checking in with them and that they have these kinds of skills and self-care things in place. And if they don't know them, it's okay to teach them. It'd be great to say, hey, I learned this new thing and I really love it. Let's pull this up on YouTube. It's free. Or, hey, I can print it and bring it to your house and read it, and we can have this kind of relaxation moment, or I can record it and send it to you. There are a lot of different options where you don't have to invest and pay for something to be able to share it with someone. If you're concerned that the person that you care about and that you're interacting with is unsafe, please ask them if they are considering suicide. Are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? The reason I say that is because we often can get uncomfortable with that, even if we have concerns about it. We might think that we're putting that seed in there that wasn't there before. And research 100% shows that that's not true. That when you ask someone that question, it actually makes them feel really supported. It lets them know that you're someone who's comfortable talking about that. And even in the moment, if you're going, I'm not comfortable talking about that, I'm going to give you, or actually, I should say, Amanda's going to give you a couple of numbers at the end of this presentation that you can call so that you can get that support that you need, or your loved one can get the support that they need. Even if you're not sure how to proceed forward, those numbers, those people and resources are going to walk you through the process. So you ask the question, get the information, and then if you need to, tap into that resource. And you can give people those resources even before they need it. The people that I really care about in my life that I'm connected to, I make sure that they have those numbers in their cell phones. Teenagers are notorious for telling me, I have it, but it's like written on a piece of paper in a back pocket or in a wallet, or like crammed into the back of a phone case. And I said, I just want to see that it's in your phone. I just want to know that you have those numbers available without you having to hunt it down or find it when you need it. I just want it there. So it's a really great time to support them in putting that into their phone. The next, I'm just going to peek really quickly to make sure I don't steal Amanda's slides. I'm not notorious for stealing your slides, Amanda. Okay, so when we're talking about using skills for Keiki, the reality is a lot of the skills that we talk about for adults can absolutely be modified to use for your littlest ones. I remember working with like the itty bitties, and parents would say like, oh, it's really great. You taught us how to do diaphragmatic breathing, deep breathing, but how am I supposed to do that with my child? And I would say, it's actually easier than you think. And the earlier you introduce this information, the better it will be, because they will just slowly adapt it into an adult version as they start to age. But they'll have these coping skills that I wish I would have had when I was a child to help them manage their emotions. So let's take, for example, deep breathing. How do I teach that to a 3, 4, 5-year-old? Well, those giant bubble wands that you can buy anywhere, you can make them at home if you have the dish detergent and you have the recipe. Bubble breathing is the same as diaphragmatic breathing. It's just a really simplified version. So what you do is you have that child take that really deep breath and say, blow the biggest bubble that you can. And they do, because they love it, right? They're blowing that big giant bubble. But now you've got them taking that deep diaphragm breath, breathing out really slowly because they don't want to pop that bubble, and they've learned a skill. And so you can say later on, when they're feeling distressed, do you need to go make bubbles? Do you need to go blow some bubbles outside? And they don't necessarily connect that to being a coping skill, but you know that you've taught them that, and that's part of their like emotional toolbox. And you can say, what do you need? And give them a list of things that they have learned and can try. You're just going to simplify it. The same thing is true if you want to use a Likert scale for Likert scale for the Keiki. Is the younger they are, the easier you should be making that scale. You can do a 1 to 5. You can use actual like images. So you can have that smiley face, the kind of flat face, then the frowny face for a really young child to say, where are you at today? Show me, point to it, and have them color coded if you want to. I've had people use it connected to like a stoplight version, so that the happy smiling face was green, and then the flat face, the like straight line, was yellow, and then the frowning face was red. So that would mean, if I'm smiling, it's good to go. If I have that kind of, flat expression that I'm not quite okay, I need a little bit of something. And then if I'm frowning, I'm in that red zone and I need a lot of something. And that's those 3 Likert ranges right there. You can use it and make it as complex as you need to, depending upon the maturity and development of the child. But help them identify those anchors. Say things like, if you were at a 0 that looked like you're super happy, show me what happy looks like. And they'll dance and they'll sing and they'll do all the different things. You're like, great, that's 0. And then tell me what it looks like when you're at a 1. And then and if you're using, let's say, for example, the 3-point range, 0, 1, and 2, the 1 being at this point, the yellow, they would say, like kind of have a little bit of a grumpy face or a little bit like slouching. And you say, yeah, you need a little bit of something. We need to do something to kind of pick that mood back up. And then if they have the 2, which is a really deep frown, and they're like, pretending like they're crying because they're showing it to you, you say, when's the time that you felt like that? Oh, I felt like that when my friend and I got to a fight, or I felt like that when I lost Mr. Bear. You say, yeah, that's exactly what 2 feels like. So what can we use when you're at a 2? So you can see, we can simplify it as much as needed, but we can also expand it as they grow up. And keep building those toy box, the emotional toolbox pieces with the bubble breaths. Some people ask me about mindfulness. There are so many great mindfulness books out there for kids. You can teach children the early positions of mindfulness and meditation by having them sit like a frog. And then you can say, now we're going to be a mountain, and we hold things in our plates. You can teach them all kinds of modified versions to help them start to learn these different things. A really fun one that we have the kids do is meow breathing, where they pull in that really deep breath and hold it, and then let out a meow as long as they can. I think some parents struggle. They struggle a little bit with meow breathing because it is so like, you know, boisterous and loud. But for those of you who don't mind, it is a really great way to get the kids to do that deep breathing and to let out that sound. And then, of course, just wiggle dancing with the kids staying home and having so much energy and not a lot of opportunity to burn off that energy, even when they're feeling anxious. Just wiggle dancing and moving that body and dancing with them can really help them burn off that extra excess energy. Then the next one, Amanda. Perfect. When we start to talk about the teens, at this point, it's going to be extraordinarily close to the full adult version. I, again, think that most teens could do most skills. They might not be as interested in them, but I do find that I've taught many, many teenagers progressive muscle relaxation, autogenic training, diaphragmatic breathing, even aromatherapy, and absolutely the dive response. So they can learn the same skills. They just might not be willing to do as much time for it. So instead of finding a half hour to do progressive muscle relaxation, find a 5 to 10 minute one that they can do in practice and one that they can do kind of on their own if they don't have the taping. You just want to make it really accessible. Make sure they use that 1 to 10 Likert scale range. I think they're really great at using up to 10. And so 1 is going to be little to no. 5 is going to be they're starting to feel it, but they did something to like manage it, and 10, the most distress they've ever felt. And then have them share a story about where each one of those points are and what their emotions look like for them and how they know when they're stressed. What does your stress look like? You can see we're already getting to know them a little bit better by saying, how do you know that you're angry? What does that look like? Some teenagers don't know. They're not going to be able to say, oh, when I get upset, this is what happens to my body. But by introducing the question, you're also introducing the seed of thought, and they're going to start to think about that. And that's what you want. You just want to introduce the idea. And so they start to think about it, and maybe they'll notice it the next time they get upset. You want to build and practice self-care with them, have them tell you what their top 3 things that they do to feel less stressed are, and then create a concrete plan. I think when we work with teenagers, as concrete as it can be is as great as it can be. I always want to like write it down, put it somewhere that they have high traffic to, and then they can read it, tell me it's there. I just want it to be like rote memory, like it's there. They don't have to think about it. And then next. When we start to talk about that concrete support plan, what I really think it's really helpful is to have them identify who they talk to that makes them feel better. So remember when I was talking earlier and saying, there's some people I call and I talk to and I just want to laugh. That's fine. Make sure that's on their plan. Make sure who they can talk to, that they can talk to about what is actually happening and that they can get good advice from, that's also on their plan. And it could be the same person and that's fine. But for some people, it is different. Make sure any providers that they have, that they, again, put it into their phone. They show you that it's in their phone. And then those crisis resources that they put that in their phone. You will get a PDF of this presentation. So all the numbers that we're about to introduce for you and any of this information you might be wanting to look back on, that you're going to get it. And then you can have them put that into their phone later if you want to. Have just a simple question and conversation with them about what gives their life meaning. If they're teenagers, it's going to move. It's going to change. I mean, I just remember all the things I wanted to do as a teenager, and I'm so glad I changed my mind about some of those things. And that's okay. What we know is life meaning can shift, and it can even shift day to day or week to week. As long as you know what it is and you have something, that's hope. And hope is what moves us forward. And in this really challenging time, we need to be able to support our teens. So if you ask them and say, what gives your life meaning? Like, what gives you purpose? If they can't answer that already, that's a little bit of a red flag that we want to make sure we're checking in with. If they're like, I don't know, I don't have any hope, I don't know what the future's going to bring. And you can say it's okay if you don't know. But what do you think it could be, or what would you like it to be? And again, you're just building that hope and building those stairs for them. And then asking just what makes them feel better. Again, that's that fast 3. What do you have? What are you going to use? And we don't want them to pick things that are really complicated. So we don't want them to be like, I love doing this thing, and that thing isn't available because we're in quarantine, or it's not available because it requires multiple steps to get to it. It's fine if they have that on their list, but we really want them to have things that are readily available and they can get to very quickly. And then next. This is me handing it back to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Dr. G. Oh, that was awesome information. So here are some of the crisis resources that we were just talking about. They're all still available 24/7. So we have the Crisis Line of Hawaii, which is actually now the Hawaii Cares Line, but the numbers are exactly the same, as well as the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So if you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, please absolutely call those hotlines. That's exactly what they're there for. The volunteers on the other end are trained to help talk you through and give you advice in those exact types of situations. We also have hotlines from the Domestic Violence Action Center. We realize that there's a lot more time being spent at home, and also home may not be a safe place for everyone. So if you or someone that you have in your life needs to have more safety or support because of intimate partner violence, call those hotlines, the Domestic Violence Action Center, again, still available. And we also have the Trevor Hotline, which is a really great resource for our LGBTQ plus youth. So if you have a youth in your life who identifies as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, is not sure, or any of the other vast amount of identities that are out there, please turn to the Trevor Project. They have a lot of great information and resources as well. You can continue to connect with us at Mental Health America of Hawaii. Our website is mentalhealthhawaii.org. If you go to our website, at the very top, there's this Get Connected banner page, and that's where you will find a lot of great online resources as well. You can find recordings of our previous trainings. You can find downloadable graphics, like coloring pages for our keiki, different videos and activities as well. We're also on social media. So if you're on Facebook, we run a couple different groups. We have a group for our keiki called Busy Bees, where we do post videos and activities to be able to do as a family. If reading is something that you're into, we also run a book club page through Facebook. And if you are looking for any Maui County specific resources, Miss Danielle Bergen is our Maui community coordinator, and she is absolutely wonderful, has a lot of knowledge, and will help point you in the right direction. So feel free to contact our Maui branch as well. And here's our contact information. So our website's on there, our Oahu address as well, and then both the numbers for both our Oahu office as well as our Maui office. I know we have a couple questions in the chat, so let me pull those up really quickly here. So the first one is, for self-care, how to go about those who do not have access to internet, phone, or any electronics to access online community supports. That is a great question. I would say you can access it for them maybe, and we can print out those resources and drop it off to them or write them down and give it to them in some way. There may still be, actually I'm not even sure if they're still running it, but I know there's certain places that allow access to computers and access to internet in kind of a public, so you can make like a reservation and utilize a computer access to the internet. Off the top of my head, I'm not exactly sure which organizations or places you can go to for that, but that might also be an option. In connecting with other people outside of technology, there's snail mail as well, right? We can send a letter, we can send a postcard. So we can still get information to other people without using technology, even though it's so ingrained in our lives today. There was a time before all this technology existed and we were still able to communicate and pass along information. So it's just kind of remembering what those processes were. Dr. D, did you have anything to add to that, or did you want to tackle that second question?
I did. I kind of cheated because I saw this question early on and really thought about it while you were presenting, because I think it's such a great question. We just assume, because there are so many resources available online, we just kind of assume that's where the go-to is. And I think that this brings up a really great point, that not everyone has access to that kind of technology. That is a privilege that we have, that we do. So for me, like, having cheated and thought about this question for a little bit, I think, we can start to get really creative. And when I say get really creative, it's really going back to some of the more traditional things. That self-care can be about spending time in nature. If you are an avid gardener, you can go drop off, do some propagation, do some seeding, and then drop it off at the free stores that they have that are in different locations, and people can go pick it up. They're wonderful Facebook gardening groups where you can post, I just dropped off 20, cuttings of blank, and people will come pick them up, and then share them with the different people in their families, just, try to make it as safe as possible. There are free libraries, little libraries where you can connect different places, and they'll tell you where you can go get free books and you don't have to purchase those. But at the heart of it, self-care is really about what makes you feel good. So it's as simple as going for a walk, or talking to your family members and making sure you're feeling connected, playing that jigsaw puzzle, pulling out those old board games, reading those favorite books that you have. It's whatever it is that makes you feel good. And that could be cooking a new recipe or an old favorite. And I think that making it as simple as possible, because I'm spending time with some older members of my family, and they're not into this. They're not into going online and doing these kinds of things, but they are really about that quality time and sitting there and talking to them and sharing in those really simple joys, like a home cooked meal and time with family and a really engaged conversation. So those would be my recommendations.
Awesome. And the second question we have is, what if I can recognize when I go from 0 to 100, but don't know how to reduce my stress quickly? Dr. G, do you want to take that one?
So when we're talking about going from 0 to 100 quickly, some people can really experience it to be like that, going, I thought I was at a 20. No, I'm not. I'm at like a 60 or 70. It can happen very quickly. And I think some of the steps to do is to start those conversations with yourself about what it looks like in your body when you start to move from those different ranges. Because what I think is happening is probably that there are some very subtle minor cues that are letting you know that your stress is moving. And even if it's moving very quickly, it will then give you a little bit of a heads up to put in that extra self-care, use those extra coping skills. We're trying to catch it before it happens. And that doesn't always happen. But my number one recommendation is that dive response. If you're someone who has a really hard time sitting still, and you're the thought of like just doing that cold wet rag on your face and deep breathing, it's just, that's not going to happen. I'm going to be pacing and moving. That's okay. If you're one of those people, burn off the energy doing some type of really intense but safe exercise. And then once you're tired, move into the dive response. And that can be really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. G. We had a couple other questions coming in, but I do know that we're at the top of the hour. So if you have to go, I totally understand. We got other meetings to jet off to, or not jet, just click on and join. So just really quickly, thank you so much for joining us. As a reminder, you will get a copy of these slides and a link to recording after today. Dr. G, if your schedule is open for the next couple minutes, you want to stay on, okay, and answer these couple questions, whoever can stay on is welcome to join us. But if not, we totally understand. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you again. This next one we have is, how can we work with you to coordinate something like this for our high school community? This is exactly what our parents and students need. So we actually have a couple other trainings that are geared more towards youth, so middle school and high school ages, that where we talk about self-care and we really kind of unpack what that looks like. We give different tips and ideas, exploring different aspects of your life where you can utilize and then brainstorm self-care tools. So if that's something you're interested in bringing to your school or to the parents of your students, contact me. I'll drop my thank you, Dr. G has already done it, amanda.martinez@mentalhealthhawaii.org. Just reach out to me. We can talk through kind of what that'll look like. All our trainings that we're offering currently are in virtual format and typically about an hour long. We do have a couple longer trainings that are available, but if you are interested in bringing those, just reach out. We can talk it through. Okay. Next one we have is, what if I am not able to identify my emotions?
It's okay. I will take this one, Amanda.
Yeah.
I think that, it's not unusual. It's not unusual for us to not be able to know how we're feeling. I think that for some of us, when we get really overwhelmed, we can sometimes say, I feel really numb. I feel really distracted or disassociated. I feel really like, just not able to concentrate, but we're not checking in and really tuning into that emotion. I would say if identifying emotions is a struggle for you, that it's a really great practice. And I work with clients all the time and we would do this. It's a really great practice to kind of just print down an emotion sheet and then every day just check in and say, how do I feel today? And don't let yourself choose happy, sad, or mad, and really start to find those really nuanced versions of emotion, and to start to try to identify that when you're doing things like watching TV or watching a movie, how does that make me feel? And then using that really really like cheat sheet. And I know people think that's oversimplified, but the reality is that's how we learn. That's how we learn about how we feel and what that might look like. I even would chit chat with different people and realize that my expression of certain emotions are very different than other people because of my cultural background, because of my own lived experiences. And so that's where it gets even more complicated, because if I say that's what that looks like, but then that's not what mine looks like, then that gets really confusing. So it's really helpful if you have trusted people to kind of bounce that off of them and to start to just appreciate that your emotions could look different and your experiences and responses could look different. And then that starts you having conversations. And of course, journaling. Journaling is an amazing way of starting to figure out how you feel and to chart how often that happens. Those would be my recommendations.
Thank you, Dr. G. Dr. G is the mental health professional in this virtual room, so I always defer those questions her way and her expertise and vast amounts of knowledge. One last question I'm seeing here is, does MHA have a list of activities that people can get involved with? I think it would depend on the types of activities that you want to get involved with. You can definitely interact with us on social media, where we post a lot of ideas of different activities you can do kind of with the people of your household or within your family. But there's a lot of really great kind of like community events that are still happening, even in virtual formats. So if you kind of sign up for different newsletters, you can sign up for our newsletter. We post, different events that are happening as well. But sign up, check out different organizations, sign up for their newsletters. They typically post what's kind of happening, even in the community in virtual format. So keeping safety guidelines in mind. So go ahead and explore in that, or out in the community that does not have access to online access during COVID. That's a really good question.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit harder because really when we talk about like not using technology and not looking for online resources, that's a little bit harder to do in terms of like community involvement in these activities, because they're so limited. They really truly are. If you're talking about, for example, someone who's a kahuna who might need a little bit more assistance and help, there are organizations that you can reach out to that will help do things like deliver food and just volunteer to call them and talk to them. But again, that involves them having a phone, and someone's going to have to be that intermediary, because someone's got to go online, call them, make the appointments. It does get a little bit more challenging, unfortunately. If there's something really specific that you're looking for someone, it seems like it could be, then just feel free to call us and ask us, and we'll try to come up with a creative list for you and some other organizations that you might be able to connect to, or some other places they can find that way to connect, because it is so important.
All right, looks like that's the questions that we have for today. If questions pop up later, again, feel free to reach out. We're always happy to help answer questions, provide information, point you in the right direction as far as resources and services go at Mental Health America of Hawaii. But other than that, thank you so much for those of you who stayed on a little bit longer with us. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your week and weekend. Make sure you get that self-care in, and we will see you next time. Thank you.